Hello, world, and welcome to episode 24 of The Top Split. I'm your host, Alex McKellar, and today the doctor is in. Joining me once again today is Dr. Alex John. AJ, the computer issues are behind you. You're back online and back racing. Welcome back, mate.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It was the longest wait of my life for AMD to release their new processors, but finally, and very happy to be back.
Yeah, nice one. Well, it's good to have you back, mate. We've been busy while you've been away, of course, with Sunday Night Lights, going from strength to strength. But a little bit more about the past couple of rounds soon. But first, we'd be remiss if we didn't address the topic of the moment, DonutGate, as it's been affectionately called. In fact, I think I might have even coined that phrase, but, you know, props to me, but whatever. All the talk, I guess, for the past week or so has been the current issues with the tyre model in relation to qualifying in particular. Personally, I briefly participated in the conversation on the forums, which I feel, on the whole, has been relatively constructive. But, you know, after a few days, I really felt the conversation was going nowhere, and I decided that I'd had my say, I'd been heard, and I'd heard others. And at that point, it was more, you know, than cars doing circles, so to speak. The ongoing conversation itself was going round and round and round, more than the horses on a merry-go-round at Luna Park sort of thing. So at that point, I was only going to get frustrated and I was out. But what is DonutGate? What's the story? Well, it starts with a post on the forums from Mr. Sasha Gourlay. He shared with the community the details of his recent one-week ban from the iRacing stewards for having left the track during qualifying and performing donuts, I should say, on the grass to heat his tyres. So in the skips at the moment, of course, the tyres respond very well to heat and pressure. They don't also seem to suffer from degradation, as is the case in other series. So someone who gets out and exceeds the grip limits of the tyres, and even more so to the extreme of doing donuts, actually improves the performance of their tyres and therefore their lap times over someone who does not. So you can also increase the temps of your tyres by weaving and excess braking on the track. But the most efficient way appears to have been popping off onto the grass and lighting them up. So one thing I would add at this point is that there is some evidence to suggest that there is a bug being exploited also where running on the grass and doing these donuts on the grass, because it's tough to do it on the track in the Skippy because it's underpowered, but doing it on the grass, the tyre temperatures actually go up in excess of what occurs on the tarmac. So this exaggerates the effected benefit of warming up those tyres even more. So the outcome of all those things combined, everything being equal in terms of pace, someone warming up their tyres will qualify in front of someone who does not. Assuming, of course, that they're even in pace. In the same situation, the person who heats up their tyres the most will be the one starting in front of their otherwise equal competitors. So that's kind of roughly a bit of a summary of the situation. So AJ, there's a few questions to dive into out of this. So let's get into it. Firstly, donuts, legit or not?
No.
No?
No. I think it's an easy flat out no. If, as you say, you alluded to it being potentially a bug exploit, and I think in any competitive game, a bug exploit is, if you know about it and you exploit it, then yeah, that's cheating. It's not intended to be that way, so exploiting it is equal to cheating.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. That's my personal take on it too. I mean, irrespective of any, you know, official rules in play, which we can go into in a minute. For me, it's not there by design. It's there as an exploit, as you say. And I made the point in the discussion earlier in the week on our Discord server, actually, that, you know, in any other game, you take an exploit, you get banned, or you use an exploit and you get banned. Why would you expect it to be any different here? surprisingly, there was at least one person on the forum suggesting the donuts on the grass are legit. I couldn't tell if they were trolling or not, but they stuck to their guns throughout the conversation that's somewhat ongoing. I think most people have sort of moved on in some respects, or at least in part, but, you know, citing other real life examples where donuts are okay, and I couldn't draw the link between what they were saying and doing donuts in iRacing to heat up your tyres. So I agree with you, AJ. Donuts on the grass are not legit, and not in the spirit of fair racing, which in my mind is the one of the real key questions here. My way of looking at it, I don't know about you, mate, but my way of looking at it was, if I'm questioning it myself whether it's legit or not, it's probably not. I do a gut check on it, it's probably not. If my gut's telling me it's not the right thing to do, then I go with that, mate.
Yeah, it's definitely a moral grey area, isn't it? And I guess cheating perhaps sounds harsh, but it's on that spectrum. It's maybe not all the way to it's not like people have gone out and bought um, a line of code that gives them super grip or something, but it's still doing something that is not intended. So I'd say it's like sort of in the middle ground, and I guess that's perhaps where the arguments come from for one side or the other, because it's not sort of all the way to using a cheat that you've fabricated and that nobody else has access to it. And that's, I guess, the other argument is that it's still the same for everybody. So um, anybody's able to go out and do this, but then at the same time, there's going to be plenty of people that don't know about the exploit, or that donuts is going to hit your tires faster. So you are sort of cheating them in a way, or you're not sort of, you are cheating them in a way. So I guess that that is where you have to draw the line.
Yeah, look, for me, cheat and exploit are in the same family. They're kissing cousins, and they don't stand or hold up to muster, so to speak. So that's where kind of we stand on that. Next question, and I don't know if I remember all the stuff that was covered in this thread, but one of the questions that came through was around the sporting code, and the question is, clear enough or not? Has everything made clear in there when it comes to this, AJ?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact words of the sporting code now, but I did read it and I thought, yeah, if uh, if people can find a loophole to get around something and get an advantage, then they will. So you have to have it black and white. There's definitely no room for grey areas in competitive, um, yeah, whatever it is that's competitive, whether it is online racing or a sport out, in the real world, so to speak. People will use any loophole they can to get an advantage, and it doesn't matter at what level the competition's at. It could be a state level thing. It could be a local club match of some sort. It has to be black and white. So I'd say that there is room for improvement for iRacing to improve the sporting code, make it a little bit clearer. And I saw some good suggestions too.
Yeah, mate, there were some good suggestions. There's a couple of things there. So I've got the rules in front of me, the sporting code. I actually went, because it's funny, the post that Sasha put up and the rule that was quoted from the sporting code that came back to him looked to be, I was surprised, and I'm not calling anyone out here, but it looked to be actually outdated. I went to the website earlier today while I was doing a bit of research, and I downloaded the latest copy of the sporting code, and the stuff in there is obviously the latest. It's what's published on their website, so that's what I'm going to sort of refer to. But the one this one in the sporting code is sort of, there's a catch-all sort of rule in most racing series or organisations called Article 134 that sort of broadly covers stuff that may not be explicitly outlined, and also makes that then at the rule maker's discretion. And people were challenging that, and I'm like, well, these people aren't here for their own advantage necessarily. They're there to keep the stated objectives of fair racing equal, but that's another conversation as well. But the specific rule, because Nim Cross Jr., the iRacing chief steward, he came into the conversation on the forums, and he quoted this specific rule, and I'll read it to you. It's on Item number 8.1.1.9, a driver may not use, and here's the key word that everyone got their knickers in a twist about, a driver may not use nefarious tactics to gain an advantage in qualifying. For example, a driver could have a prototype class car slow down for the sole purpose of creating drafting situation for the benefit of slower cars. This may or may not include cutting the course. iRacing will determine what constitutes an advantage. Getting a draft through normal qualifying strategy or luck is okay. So there's a couple of things there. Obviously, there's the main one, the nefarious tactics. They've used an example which may sort of direct people's attention away from the matter at hand in the qualifying in a multi-class. It doesn't really affect us all that much anymore, given solo qualifying. So the relevance of that is a little bit loose at best. But the two key statements there, iRacing will determine what constitutes an advantage, and drivers may not use nefarious tactics to gain an advantage in qualifying. Now, nefarious, that's the word of the day or the word of the month, AJ. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, look, I don't know. Nefarious seems like quite a strong word to use. But for me, it comes back to you doing something which someone else may not know about to gain an advantage. And, uh, it's the way that we qualify as well, that being that it is um, a lone quali and you can't see what anyone else is doing. So then it sort of forces you into this situation where you have to consider actually doing this yourself. And um, basically saying the situation that Sasha was in, if we can sort of go there, was that he was sort of questioning, is this necessary? Are people doing it? And was nearly forced into that situation of having to do it himself, because it only takes one person to do it, and then basically everyone is forced to do it. So
Yeah, I think force is a pretty strong word there. Like, I knew the situation was going on last season when they fixed it, right? And the fix that they applied last season is probably the one thing that I had the biggest problem with, if I'm honest. The rest of this stuff is doesn't bother me too much. But that fix was pretty diabolical. But when you say forced to do it, mate, I've driven 2 full seasons with this issue floating around. I never felt forced to do it, if that makes sense. If people are checking their guts and saying, well, everyone else is doing it, I'll have to do that to be competitive, then, yeah, I don't know, mate. I don't know if that's true, you know?
I, I don't know. I feel like in a competitive situation, when it falls down to it, you if somebody's doing something like this, that you can. I don't know. It's
Well, put it
something.
to put it to you this way.
It's very simple though. It's like
Yeah,
it's such a simple thing. Go and do donuts on the grass. Like,
yeah.
it's not. Anyone can do it, and so it's such a simple thing. You go and do it, and then everyone's on an equal playing field. Like, I used to race RC cars, and gooping your tires. They basically put additive on your tires to soften the rubber, and that. It depends where you race, but that was allowed in some cases. But then you'd get the people that had special, their own special group, and they'd have their own concoction with whatever the chemicals they were that they were using, and then everybody ended up having to go down this rabbit hole of trying to find the same um,
Same mixture.
solution, same mixture to get on a level playing field. And yeah, it's sort of the same thing. Yeah, that you can control the additive you use, but then you have somebody just mix in something else, and then it's just all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, I guess the difference there being that uh, iRacing have stated that donuts aren't allowed, so it's not a degree of how much or how less you do it. You shouldn't be doing it. You know, that I can see where you're going with it. It becomes a
It's a race to the bottom sort of thing.
correct. Yeah, that's right. I was going to think an arms race was the thing I was thinking of in terms of that, but yeah, I think about the argument that everyone can do it or everyone else is doing it. Why shouldn't I? I go back to my 11-year-old daughter who says all the kids in her class are watching Stranger Things, right? And I go, well, that doesn't make it right. You know, like it's rated M. It's for 15-year-olds. In our house, you don't watch it. You know, like, and I tell her she gets scared by scary things really badly. I said, "This is a scary thing. You're not going to like it. I know all your friends are watching it, and I feel bad that you're missing out, but you're not watching it. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't make it right." For me, nefarious tactics again comes back to the gut check. If it's not in the spirit of it, you shouldn't be doing it. And that's quite honestly, when we talk, our original question was, is the sporting code clear enough or not? I may be simple, but that's clear enough for me. The other question, the other rule was the one that sort of people brought up that just sits above at 8.1.1.8. Drivers can only use the racing surface for qualifying and racing. The apron is not defined as the racing surface. The drivers may not use the apron to gain an advantage in qualifying or racing. Any advantage will be determined by iRacing. A protest may be filed through the proper channels for this offence. Now, I would suggest that this came originally up in response to the oval scene where people were parking the nose of the car against the wall, lighting up the rear tyres on the apron, and then or lighting up the rear tyres at least to gain advantage in quali, or alternatively the situation where people where road series went to ovals like the Pro Mazda and what have you, where they had enough grip to ride the apron and it was faster than the oval racing surface. Those two things aside, the first statement I think really applies here. Drivers can only use the racing surface for qualifying and racing. Thoughts, AJ?
Yeah, well, that's a good one. That's sort of very black and white and puts a nail in the coffin of the argument. But in the same light, if you had a car, or say like we get this new time model on other cars, and they do have the power to do donuts on the racing surface, then what do you do then?
They said what Nim said was, and I wrote it down somewhere. If it is a real life tactic, we're fine with it. Now, I don't think anybody, with the exception of one person in the discussion, was arguing that doing doughies is a real life tactic in the road racing scene, whether it be on the grass or otherwise. So when these high powered cars come in, and indeed in the skips at the moment, people are still weaving, locking up the brakes and doing stuff like that. And I'm, to a degree, okay with that, in so much as it does represent real life a lot closer. And, it's, it passes my gut check. And I'm not the gold standard here. We're just discussing our opinions on it. But for me, if I can see it on the track in real life and day-to-day occurrence, I'm okay with it. Now, people's experiences on that will vary, hence the broad discussion that went on sort of thing. But, I thought that was pretty clear as well, even though it wasn't stated in the sporting code. I thought it was great that Nim dived in and clarified. And he was actually quite funny in some parts too while he was in the conversation. So a bit of proactivity on his part was welcome. But does that sort of sit well with you, mate, when these cars come in and get the new tyre model?
Yeah, well, I mean, I absolutely agree, and you have to think to watching something like a Bathurst top 10 shootout, and the cars are going around, weaving and accelerating, braking, getting heat into the tires through the brakes, and by weaving, you definitely don't see any cars. I mean, that maybe it'd be quite an interesting thing for V8 supercars to do to have cars doing donuts on the outlet. But yeah, you definitely don't see cars doing donuts. And I really had to scratch my head to think of a series or any motorsport that where I've seen people doing donuts. And I've never seen in any motorsport a car doing a donut before a quali session.
Well,
Uh,
now,
and
timely. Hey,
uh,
let me cut you off there. Timely thing. I was watching Dennis Johansson's stream the other day, and in between the races, he had some drifting up, and my jaw hit the floor. I was watching this bloke, and he was just about to do his run, and what's he doing? He's flipping donuts, isn't he, on the tarmac? at just before the start line, did half a dozen doughies, green light, like line up for the line, away he went. So it's not unprecedented, but certainly I'd say it'd be a long bow to draw to compare that to road racing on iRacing or in real life, mate.
Yeah, no, I think, and I did see that was one of the examples
Yeah.
in the forums, but
Yep.
I think that drifting and circuit racing are two completely different things. I mean, you may as well compare doing lighting up your tires before you're about to go and do a drag race to racing on a circuit.
Yeah.
Sort of same thing. They're completely different.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Now, the 1 week ban, that was another topic of conversation. I think it was actually more what brought Sasha to the forums. Now, it came with no warning, as in there was no, hey, you've been caught doing this is your warning sort of thing. We don't know if Sasha had any priors sort of counting against him. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was interesting, and I thought about that the day I was reading about it, and I went from being oh no, poor Sasha, he's been a bit hard done by, and then I thought about it, I was like, no, he deserved to get banned, and then I think I went back to poor Sasha again. That's definitely a more of a grey area than the black and white. Should you actually be doing donuts for me? And yeah, maybe you tell me what you think because I could probably be swayed one way or the other.
All right, so I'm going to read you, I think, because I had to tee it up. I've got windows everywhere. I'm going to read you Nim Cross Jr., the iRacing Chief Steward's entry into the conversation. So he's ended it with that 8.1.1.9. He said drivers may not use nefarious tactics to gain advantage in qualifying. That was the thing, right? Doing donuts or putting your nose against a barrier to spin tyres is not allowed. It hasn't been allowed, and we've enforced the rules against doing this since we've opened our doors. There are an infinite number of ways to warm your tyres, and a lot of the questions that are posed here and the answers can be based on common sense. Can I tell you, those are the most sage-like words I've heard in this. Apply some common sense, people. Anyway, if it is a real-life tactic, we are fine with it. We're not going to list the infinite number of possibilities in the sporting code. If you are doing something that takes advantage of a bug, it is no different than wall riding, cutting the course, or any other issue that might be found in our sim world. We do our best to keep the competition fair for everyone. Any tactic found to be nefarious, meaning simply cheating, and something surely found in the real world, will be addressed appropriately if proven in a protest. That was not the one I'm looking for, but certainly a good entry. Basically, the one I'm looking for has disappeared from me, but it basically said you're not going to get any warnings, and I'm just going to find it if I can. What's swaying you on it, AJ?
Well, the fact that like Sasha did put in a bit of an effort to try and find out where we stood, or where the steward stood on the tactic being used. And I mean, he seemed in his writings even that he was dismayed that the tactic was continuing on this season. It sounded like he didn't really want to have to be involved in having to do this, and that's what I was trying to get at before when I'm saying that it's sort of you only need one person to do it, and then it sort of forces everyone else to need to do that to be competitive. And Sasha's a quick guy, so this is probably more for, well, no, not even for the faster guys, but just wherever you are at your level. Um, if people are doing it, then you got to do it yourself to be competitive.
Oh, I don't agree. I don't agree. I'd rather sleep at night comfortably than feeling that I had to use an exploit or a cheat to be competitive. I mean, that's why people get kicked out of high level esports, right? If they're found cheating, they just get kicked out. It doesn't matter who's doing it and whatever, unless it's an accepted thing, but under the auspices of the rules. And we've talked about the clarity of the rules, whether people agree with it or not. If it's against the rules, I don't care who's doing it. Now, one of the things that's been pointed out here that look is challenging. I don't have a problem with it, but others probably might or may. I don't know. This is something because with sole qualifying, the fact is the only way you can catch someone doing this is from spectating, because there was a race earlier in the season, or last season I think it was, at Charlotte Roval, and I suspected someone was using the apron because you could gain advantage from doing that at Rovals. For a couple of reasons, I suspected it in qualifying. Either in the race session or afterwards via the replay, you can't see them. You just can't see because it's solo qualifying and they are blocked from you. We can see it when we do the broadcast I should say, because we join as spectators. But the only way, and in this case, the only way Sasha could have been protested and was in fact protested was from someone being in spectator mode, because that way you can see everyone. So the question is, AJ, in your opinion, is it legit to submit protests from spectators?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, if that's the only way that you can catch someone doing this, then that's fine. It it seems unfortunate for Sasha in this case that I don't know whether he's targeted for bringing up the problem, because I'm sure there's plenty of other people that probably should have ended up, receiving a bit of a slap on the wrist and a 1 week ban along with him.
Yeah, there most definitely are a few floating around. And I found my rule thing, right? So we're going back to the 1 week ban, whether it's briefly, because I found my thing, 1 week ban, whether it was an issue, no warning or stuff. I found the quote. This is from Nim Cross Jr. It has been explained that this is not allowed. You may do so at your own risk, but if a protest comes in showing that you're doing the tactics we've discussed as not being allowed, the first offence will be a 1 week suspension, and issues after that will add a week. Hopefully, you will choose to race fairly. So he was pretty clear on it. That was going to be that. And to some extent, I'm okay with that. Look, no, actually, I'm pretty okay with that. 95% okay with that. It's up to us when we sign up to accept the terms of racing, all of which are in the sporting code. And again, that grey area about people, are they going to argue whether it's clear enough? For me, I'm pretty okay with all of it. I chose to read the sporting code. I like to follow the rules. I like to know what they are. And I'm okay with it being a protest. For me, it's like speed cameras. The people that complain the most about speed cameras out on the road are the ones that speed. I don't have a problem with them because I don't speed.
Mhm.
Anyway, so sorry to chop and chase. I finally found that thing I was looking for. Anyway, excuse me. Going back to the spectator stuff, again, I don't have a big issue with it. The big issue that in terms of someone protesting from spectators, if I'm honest, I'm that straight down the line. I probably would have done it myself if I happened to see it. Certainly, I've been in races myself where a big incident's occurred, and this chat over the radio. And I've gone back and watched the replay, and I've submitted a protest after the fact that didn't involve me, because I saw someone literally sitting in the pits waiting for a lap, then coming out and taking someone out. Now that to me sucks. It's not, I find that quite egregious. So I'm going to protest it. I'm entitled to. I'm allowed to. It's and to me, if anything, that's helpful because I don't want to race with that guy again, and I'm protecting you from racing with that guy again.
Yeah, you're making the community as a whole a better place for everyone else, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that actually reminds me, I've protested a person from a Twitch stream before,
yep,
and not the person that was streaming, but somebody else that was racing in the stream,
yeah, yeah.
and it's the same thing.
Yeah, for mine, I'm okay with people and spectators doing it. I mean, I know there are a bunch of people that regularly spectate races just for the enjoyment of watching it and seeing what's going on in the community, if they don't necessarily want to jump into the race themselves. So I'm okay with that, and I'm not worried by it. The bit that worries me around that is it is the only place you can see this because of the way qualifying is implemented. The solo qualifying stuff is to avoid drafting and congested tracks and the hassles that might come with that. I was talking to Luke Whitten about it during the week, and we were saying, how would you do it? You can't. Can you go back to open quali? Can you go back to... I don't know how you could make the cars all visible on the track without making them, contactable, if that makes sense. That's a coding problem. I don't know how to do that. But that's my only problem, is that realistically, there's no doubt has been more people doing it than have been pointed out. There's only been one banning that we know about, but having to be in spectators to do that is the one challenging bit for me. So the other thing to sort of close out on that, anything you wanted to say on the 1 week ban stuff, all that stuff we've just been saying before we move on to the next part of that discussion?
Well, yeah, I think the Sasha story, that's a two-part thing, and one is doing the act and should he get a ban? And yes, I think that's pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part is sort of the emotional human side of that, and saying, geez, he was unlucky, really. He said, like, to be the only
He
one,
was
and
unlucky.
it was perhaps brought on by himself anyway. You'd have to say he's unlucky, but at the end of the day, he did the crime, so he got to pay the time. You can't feel too bad for that.
Well, he's only unlucky in so much as he got caught. If he doesn't do it, he doesn't get caught. But yeah, look, I can agree. I can have a bit of a chuckle to say it's pretty unlikely he was going to get caught. And that goes back to my previous statement. The one thing that bothers me a little bit about this is that, you lose a bit of trust in your competitors because there's no way to see what they're doing necessarily. And the guy that finishes in front of you in quali by, half a second, 3/4 of a second, and then he's almost that slower than you in the race, you just go, I don't know, like you just can't see. Anyway, one of the other things that sort of got me out of the conversation this week was the circular nature of it. Everyone rocked up to this conversation with their opinions, and pretty much everyone left with the same opinions, myself included. No one's mind was changed. No one's opinion or otherwise. Nobody was convinced of anything other than what they thought when they arrived. For me, it was interesting from an observation perspective, if nothing else, almost a psychology study in that, like everyone was voicing these opinions and no one really, taking any of it. Like it was all one-way traffic. Everyone sort of pushing out from themselves without taking on anything from anyone else. At least that was my observation of it, mate. I don't know how much you dived into it.
Yeah, but I think perhaps humans are on a bell curve in terms of the majority of people probably wouldn't have weighed in the argument, and then
Yeah.
you get the extremes on either end. So, and I think the extremes, you're not going to change their mind anyway. But it's always fun to read.
You're talking about the silent majority there, and I think you're right. In society in general, it's the silent majority that sits back quietly and just accepts quite a broad range of conditions in any given thing, and will not necessarily feel aggrieved enough to dive in. And those at the extremes, as you say, will be the ones that dive in. But it'd be interesting to see what the silent majority thinks. My guess is that most people either don't know, don't care, and are just happy to get on and race more broadly. Certainly, I mean, I know there are a few people saying, Sasha was one in particular who's saying, oh, everybody's doing it. Well, not in my experience, Sasha. If it is, I'd be sitting, a lot further back on the grid each race than I am at the moment. I don't think that many people are doing it. That's just my impression. But anyway, that is what it is, mate. Any final thoughts before we move on?
No, I think we've spun that one pretty well.
Very good. All right. So for mine, clearly, new tyre model is still a work in progress. This season changes are a really big improvement in my books, hence the flood back to the Skippy series. For me, I just want a level playing field where no questions remain on this sort of stuff. It's a bug or similar. iRacing continue to work on it. It makes me sad to think that people will choose to exploit it, but, that's the nature of things. People are people at the end of the day. Perhaps the hardest thing is that, like I said, that nagging sense of distrust. Did the person in front of me set their time legitimately? In the vast majority of cases, I really think they do, but the nagging doubt will remain for the time being, and that's such a shame. But meanwhile, let's move on. The racing does go on, and the racing in the Skippies remains a ton of fun. Speaking of which, let's quickly move on to the Sunday Night Lights. The last 2 weeks were astounding, to say the least. Oh, AJ, I was dreading the participation drop-off when the schedule was announced, with Oran Park and Barber Motorsports Park listed back-to-back on the schedule. Typically, these two tracks will really kill off Skippy participation. For mine, they are challenging and technical, and I really enjoy them. I enjoy the challenge. I do get frustrated at Barber because I struggle there, but that challenge is what keeps me coming back. I quite enjoy Oran Park as well. I find it a fun track to drive, and personally, I like the history of it in being a classic Australian track that sadly doesn't exist anymore, not in the real world anyway. Neither of the tracks, though, appeal to everyone. But that can be said of every track. These ones just apparently appeal less to most. But what was amazing about the past two rounds of Sunday Night Lights is that the community continued to come out in force. In fact, the Oran Park round saw our highest strength of field race ever at over 4,800. With the race leading into that one that many of our drivers use as a warm up, they even surpassed that mark. They cracked 49. It was quite a big night for us at SNL. Then came the Barber round with a strength of field in excess of 45.50. I can tell you that blew me away even more. To think that the community has rallied around the series to the extent where we can draw that sort of field at traditionally one of the most lowly participated tracks is simply amazing, and I've been tremendously appreciative of the support we've received from the community. AJ, I know you've been watching from the sidelines so far this season, but what's your impression been so far?
Yeah, well, for me, I liken the new Skippy to watching a MotoGP race. In that, before we had very straight handling cars, more or less like on rails. But now with the change to the tire model, it's like watching a MotoGP race. In that the cars are sometimes backing into the corners and twitching around, and you're really seeing the drivers work to get the fast lap times out of their cars. And that works to the advantage of some drivers. It really brings those with great car control to the fore. Um, but it's also made for great racing because, little mistakes tend to creep in there as well. And the packs have this fantastic tight, close racing with the cars moving around, ducking in and out amongst each other. So for me, it's actually been really great to watch as a spectator. Um, and and often, when the Sunday Night Lights is running, nearly simultaneously alongside Formula One, you could just put the Sunday Night Lights on 2 times speed and pretend it's a Formula One because it's 10 times more interesting.
Had my voice, it'd be like 10 times higher at that point. But yeah, I take your point. Although, you know, doff my hat to the F1 guys last week at Silverstone. That was bloody good race. But, I agree with you. And for mine, I couldn't be happy with how it's travelling thus far in terms of Sunday Night Lights. I'm looking forward to seeing how the things, progress in the remainder of the season. As for the races themselves over the past couple of weeks, firstly, a big shout out to Corey Steinhauser and Tim Gorkrotch, who stepped up and took on the Top Split TV coverage duties for the Oran Park round while I was away with family. I really did appreciate them filling the breach, and they were rewarded, as it turns out, with the highest strength of field in MNL and SNL history. So congrats to the guys, and a great show it was. Thank you once again. A great race indeed it was, and it was taken out by Stuart Adcock in a breakout win for the ANZ driver. I don't know how much of Stuart you've seen, AJ, but I've been saying for a while now that he's had the pace to threaten, and it was just going to take a bit of luck to go his way before the results started coming.
Yeah, no, I've seen Stuart around in a few of the SNL races, and definitely up there. But I tell you what, it was a great achievement because racing against the likes of Hendrickson and Toy Carlo, who seem to be running away with the series this season, to beat those guys, even if it was a sort of bide your time and wait for your opportunity type race. That's great, and hopefully that will only increase his confidence and see a few more results coming his way. But also the same race, having Mitchell McLeod, another ANZ driver, right up there, and Mitchell's fast. I see him stream quite a bit, and he's generally quick in whatever he's doing. But he was, not all that far off that front pack as well. So I thought it was actually quite a good effort all round from the ANZ guys.
Yeah, look, sorry to contradict you there a little bit, mate. That was at our barber round that we'll come to in a minute. Mitchell actually at that race, he took out the second split. I saw him; he was spewing. He that he missed out on the top split. But you're right. The next week, which we'll get to in a sec, he went gangbusters. But just returning to Oran Park for a minute. It was great to see someone in Stuart Adcock take out the race at an historic Australian track. You're right, he did sort of race really patiently because, he was sitting there in third for the longest time and then it opened up for him at the end. The podium positions, though, were filled by SNL regulars Sammy J, Toy Carla and Håkon Grebstad. The former, Sammy J, was in a tight battle with the winner of the Road America round from the week before and Tim Hendrickson before coming together between the two in turn 1-2, that tough turn 1-2 complex. On the final lap, brought the end to Hendrickson's chances that saw Adcock, who'd been running with those lead two throughout, as you say, AJ, and he was just biding his time patiently. He copped a hit on the way through as he navigated through that incident, but he managed to circulate the final lap with enough pace to take the race out. So, and as we were saying, notably in the other splits, Mitchell McLeod, he was gutted, but he didn't make the top split, but he signalled the bigger things that were on the horizon that you were talking about, AJ, with a win in the second split. And then, look, can I tell you, that second split has a host of regulars from previous seasons sprinkled throughout the field, once again showing how tough it is to get a run in the top split these days. The likes of Russell Clark, Sean Caron, and even Kevin Henderson working hard in the second split to try and crack it back for a regular run in the broadcast race there, AJ. Any thoughts on those guys missing out at the moment?
Oh, look, I'm sure that I'm going to be down there with them tonight. So, I'd say back when I was racing and I cracked 3K and I was like, great, I'm safe. I can get in the top split race if I choose to enter. But now it's the goalposts have moved, but uh, I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing because it just means that you got to try that little bit harder. And when you actually make it to the top split, it's it's something special, I guess, to be able to get up there and race, with those top flight guys. And the fact that the Sunday Night Lights is sort of turning into the top stuff of the week, um, if you can make it to that, then that's massive.
Yeah, absolutely. I was even contacted by one of our staunchest supporters during the week about scoring the fourth split races. He'd had a great run, but was sadly, I stopped scoring the fourth split a number of seasons ago where things weren't on the up and up like they are now. I don't know about you. Maybe I should start revisiting that, or you think it's all about the incentive to work your way back up in there, you reckon?
Oh yeah, look, I like the idea that you definitely want to be sort of aiming and climbing and improving, and I'd say try your best to just keep the results coming, and eventually you'll find yourself in the third split, hopefully, and then second split, and go from there.
Absolutely. So, Stuart Adcock had the honour of taking out the highest soft race thus far in SNL history. Congrats to him again. And moving on to round 5 at Barber, another bumper field took the grid, as we said. Once again, it was down to the wire with Hendrickson and Toy Carla doing it out up front once again. Pretty specky race, that one. That week, it was a little bit more smooth, or it went a little bit more smoothly at the top with both drivers making it to the line relatively unscathed this time round, and Hendrickson taking out the win, his third of the season so far. Toy Carla, he was looking back. I don't know. I thought he might be looking to address the sins of the previous week, as that incident through turn 1-2 that sort of ended Hendrickson's shot at the title. Really came down to an error on his part, and he didn't really press the issue in the closing stage, preferring perhaps to tuck in behind and belatedly redress the outcome from the Oran Park round. Did you manage to catch much of that race, AJ?
Yeah, no, I did, and that's what I had in my mind was the Sammy and Tim show out front with McLeod. coming in behind them. Although, yeah, no, a great race, and there was a good pack right throughout that race. Actually, it was only the incident in the sort of the latter laps. I can't remember the corner, but it's basically their version of the corkscrew, being an American track, and yeah, it was only for that incident that you would have probably had 5 or 6 cars, battling across the line up in that front pack.
Yeah, absolutely right, mate. The race itself was not without incident and excitement generally. There was a front pack of 6 or more cars for much of the race, and it wasn't broken up until the later stages where, as you say, 6 into 1 doesn't really go, and that rule came into play through the waterfall chicane, as they call it there. And whilst it first really looked like the guys had it sorted. I couldn't believe they got it sorted. They were Noah's Ark style on the approach, and then they lined up single file, but there just wasn't enough room for all those skippies to go line astern, and it came unstuck for several of the drivers, leaving Hendrickson and Toykala to race away. And Edwards and McLeod, I tell you what, that was one of the more remarkable finishes in SNL history. Simon Edwards and Mitchell McLeod, this is the one you were talking about earlier. They were separated by less than a millisecond. Less than a millisecond on the line. It was indiscernible to the naked eye, and it took more than 4 decimal places, four decimal places on the timing sheets to split them. And I dropped into Mitchell McLeod's Twitch channel, Talk Inc., I think it's called Talk Inc., after the broadcast. And rather than being gutted by getting pipped by such a margin, because he ended up finishing 4th, he was grinning from ear to ear at what had been an amazing race in the front pack. That, AJ, is why we do it. That is what SNL is all about. Great racing that overshadows your finishing position.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. I'm glad to hear, and that's the thing. Coming back, it doesn't matter if you're racing in the 4 split, as long as the racing is good. It doesn't really matter. Just have fun.
Exactly right. Now, overall, the standings after 5 rounds see Toykala and Hendrickson on top of the pops, as you would expect after the results they've had so far this season. Again, they're separated by just 2 points, with Anthony Katz some 40 points, I should say, not 40 positions, 40 points behind in third. The leading ANZ driver, once again, is Mr. Ben Snell, who's just 1 point behind Kat. And last season's official winner, the official season winner rather than the SNL winner, was Team of Escalampy, rounds out our top 5. He's about half a dozen points behind in 5th. So the SNL train moves on to Sebring for tonight's round 6, where we're hoping once again to get a bumper field, although with the Spa 24-hour race on this weekend, who knows what that'll bring. We'll have to wait and see. Certainly a really pleasing development during the week, and we were talking about us being the top soft, but there's an Iberian club-based strength of field race that's popped up, and I feel like the Spanish-speaking skippy community is going through somewhat of a boom at the moment, and the race that happened during the week, I should say, really spoke to that. AJ, they've got a community organised race that had a strength of field in excess of 4,500, which is outstanding. The SNL season average at the moment is a tick over 46, so they're really right up there in their first race. And personally, I was really pleased to see it because I love the skippy community coming out and seeing that sort of action, AJ.
Yeah, and definitely the Iberians have been good supporters of SNL. So perhaps that'll entice a few more to jump in the SNL race and make that another one of their prime soft races. But it's great to see, and we've had competitions between US, UK, and Australia. Perhaps Iberia could jump in and join in that sort of race. You could have a state of origin type thing across 4 countries.
Yeah, how long before we see an Iberian official season winner as well? A
Mm.
lot of strength down there, a lot of racing, and probably I was looking at some stats on the forum today. The highest population of skippy races comes from the Iberian Club. So, plenty of strength to draw on down there, no doubt. Now, you talked about the US soft. That's the other race that's floating around. Hasn't quite found its legs yet, but between the Iberian-based race and SNL, I feel like there are some really great opportunities for the best drivers to challenge themselves in the official racing at least each week. So AJ, from us, I wish the organisers of the Iberian Soft Race all the best in what they're doing and congratulate them on getting off to such a great start. It's really fantastic. Of course, our little ANZ soft race that we call Sunday Night Lights and the associated broadcast this week from Sebring will be live tonight, Sunday the 21st of July from 9:15 p.m. Australian Eastern Time, which is GMT plus 10 at the moment. So join us on track or for the live broadcast on the Top Split TV Twitch channel. That's where all the action takes place. And if you are in the race, we'll be in the Top Split Discord server for the broadcast and the post-race interviews if you'd like to come up and let us know how you went. So make sure you join us there. Broadcast replays are all up on the Top Split YouTube channel after the races. And you can always find anything Sunday Night Lights or podcast related at the topsplit.com website. All those details will be in the description of the podcast below. So, but for now, AJ, are you planning on doing any streaming again anytime soon?
Not anytime too soon. Give me a couple of weeks. I need to get everything set up. But have a look out. You'll probably find me in a GT3 car or something very soon.
Nice, very good. So I'll put a link up to AJ's stream channel in the description of the podcast below. Thank you once again, AJ, for joining me. It's been a great pleasure to have you back. And thank you to everyone who's been supporting the Sunday Night Lights series. As we talked about earlier, I cannot believe the support we've had so far in the season. I'm hoping we can continue to build. I mean, we featured in this month's official iRacing member highlights package that they had up on their YouTube and across all their social media. It was actually last season's Barber finish, and it was submitted by one of our drivers, Julian O'Fray, by the looks. It's possibly the best finish in SNL history, not dissimilar to the one we were talking about between Simon Edwards and Mitchell McLeod this season, but it was for the race win, and it involved 3 cars rather than 2, and they were barely separable on the line. But the footage was actually not from the broadcast, but it was no doubt from the replay submitted by O'Fray. But it had the SNL commentary, Core MI commentary overlaid over the top, and it was really nice surprise to see our content shared in that way. It brought a smile to my face anyway. So, but yeah, thanks again for joining me today, AJ. Any words of wisdom before we head off?
No, just get out there and give it a go. I say I'm enjoying being back and racing so much. So I'm keen, and just get out there.
Awesome. Well, that'll about do us for today. If there's anything you'd like us to cover on the show, please reach out to us in all the places you know that we are, and of course, all listed in the description below. We'd love to hear more from our audience in what you want to see and what you want to hear. Yeah, just while it occurs to me, I was talking to Will Fisher earlier today, and he suggested maybe we talk about the incident limits at the Spa 24-hour race. 44x total for the first race. Everyone limited to 44x. That must have been a nightmare. Then the follow-up sessions, they had unlimited. And that's had its own issues from what I've seen, but that's a conversation for another day. Anyway, if you like what we do, please show your support by liking, subscribing, thumbs up, all those sorts of things on the different content platforms that you can find us on. It really does help. Even leaving reviews on iTunes, where you can find the podcast, really helps us be more visible, at least, in sharing this great hobby, and that's what it's all about. Until next time, though, I've been your host, Alex McKellar, and on behalf of the good doctor, Alex John, thank you for joining us, and until next time, ciao for now.